the reminder to everybody. We got a few topics that we want to talk about today, Judy. And still, I'll give them a few more minutes to see if they will come on, but we're going to talk about material facts today. Contract termination and agency termination and boycotting. That's something we don't talk about a lot. So that's one of our topics as well. And Tiffany actually had a funeral to attend, so she will not be with us today. Of course, she wished she was here. However, she had some other personal things to attend to today. Oh. I'm sorry, Judy, are you talking to me? I didn't hear you.
That's because I was muted. Sorry. I'm fine with you waiting if you know
Okay.
get more people on.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, ma'am. I know some may jump on, so let's just give them a few more minutes to see if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Hi, Mary. Just letting you know, we are waiting a few minutes because we forgot to send out the reminder for Glad You Asked today. Up here's some.
Okay.
So I just sent out a text to everybody, so maybe it's going out, but if you'll just bear with us just a few more minutes, we'll get started. We'll just give others an opportunity to get on.
Sounds good. I'm fine with that. I'll just keep it on my calendar for every week, even though it's every other.
Yeah. As that
That way I know.
Very good, very good. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on. I feel better now. I forgot to send out the reminder earlier today about Glad You Asked. So thank you all for coming on. So I was going to give, since it's 1:08, how about this? I'll get started at 1:10. Give them 2 more minutes. All right, everybody. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I do apologize for not getting that reminder out earlier today about Glad You Asked, but we have some pretty good topics that I would like to discuss today. And Tiffany sends her hellos to everybody. She actually had a funeral that she had to attend and take care of some family things. So she will not be on with us today. But nevertheless, we're going to get into some topics. So what we're going to talk about today, material facts, and what should we be disclosing? We're going to talk about contract termination and agency termination. And can we get paid if agency is terminated? And we'll also talk about boycotting. We've had an issue come up that I think will be a good topic of discussion as it relates to boycotting and antitrust and all that good stuff. So let's get started. And matter of fact, I think I'm going to start with boycotting. Let me just take the situation that we came across just this week. Actually, it began probably about a month or so ago, where there was an issue with a one of our agents. Not so much an issue on the agent's part, but one of the agents was on a showing. And at the showing, the buyer client bumped into a piece of property in the home. And according to the owner, the seller, it was damaged, but really couldn't tell that it was damaged. Long story short, after we get through all of that, the homeowner, the seller, then says, I don't want that agent from your office to show my house anymore. Okay, all right, not a problem. Buyer wasn't interested in that particular property anyway, so we got through that. Well, lo and behold, another agent from our office wanted to show the same property. Seller, well, before I get there, so our agent picks up the phone and calls the agent of the other firm and says, hey, have some buyers, potential buyers that may be interested in this property, and I'd like to show that property. Well, what that agent says to our agent, well, no, you can't do that. He wants to know why. Well, you shouldn't even make the appointment. My seller says they don't want any agents from your office, from Keller Williams Central in Burlington, to show their property. Okay. I see you, Cindy. All right. Yes. So what do you all think about that? Could that possibly be considered boycotting? Would that violate antitrust laws? I see two things here. We have a seller who is saying, I don't want anybody from your office to show my property. Then you have the agent, the listing agent saying, don't even make the appointment. No, you cannot go see it. What do you all think about that? What do you think about that? I had several things to run through my mind when I was approached with it. I started thinking, well, that could come across discriminatory. If the seller is saying, I don't want agents from your office, then I started thinking, oh, the listing agent says, don't even make the appointment. Are you boycotting our firm? That's a problem. That is a problem. So that does go over on the lines of boycotting. You are saying that you publicly listed this property for sale. You have checked public marketing on your listing agreement. You have advertised it in MLS for sale and said you will cooperate with another firm but you're not allowing my firm in. Has anybody ever ran into a situation like that? This is my first, I'm going to be quite honest. So talk to me. Tell me what you all think about this. Boycotting is
That's
not.
nuts.
It is.
That's nuts.
It
That's
is.
nuts. I
Yeah.
mean, the listing firm, did you call? I mean, I'm sure, is this a single agent with their own brokerage firm, or is this an agent with a firm? Because that's a big thing. Like, I'd immediately be on the phone, or have you already talked to that BIC?
Yeah, talk to the BIC. Even in the first situation, talk to the BIC, talk to the covering BIC, whoever was covering for her, because she was on vacation, had to go on vacation. So I talked to whoever was covering for her, actually spoke with the actual agent in the first situation. But here's what I did. I told that agent, I said, before I even get involved, because I was involved in the beginning, before I even get involved again, let's see if we can't get this listing agent to start thinking appropriately and accurately in this situation. I said, let them know, number one, this could be construed as discriminatory. Are you discriminating? I said, although discrimination can be somewhat hard to prove if there's no track record of it. I said, but also that listing agent cannot tell another agent, another firm, not to schedule the showing. And that's what that listing agent was doing. They were telling our agent not to schedule the showing. You have to give us the opportunity to schedule the showing. Now, if the seller chooses to decline, then we're trading on other territory at that point. My biggest concern with, the seller can have a request and the listing agent has to follow that request legally if it's legal. However, that listing agent cannot tell our agent not to schedule that or schedule that appointment or make that request. So that's the issue that I had. And that's what I told that agent to go back to the listing agent to share. Guess what? He was allowed, I won't even say allowed. He showed the property. He ended up being able to get in there and show the property. Because when you start talking boycotting, that is an antitrust law. And that's a big deal. And we do not want to get into that part of it. Antitrust is a big deal. So they ended up allowing him to show it. It was a thing though. It was a few days before, it was maybe, I think it was the next day, they finally let him in or approve the showing request. So that's a no-no. So that's something we cannot do. We cannot, as listing agents, we cannot tell another firm, especially if we have it publicly marketed, that that entire firm is not allowed to show that property. Okay, so that one was a new one for me this week, but that one was a biggie. Any questions about that or any comments about that particular situation? And no one's ever run into that, huh? That's good. That's very good. All right, so the other two topics that I wanted to talk about today is material fact and contract termination and agency termination. Let's talk about material facts. I know we, over the last couple of weeks or so, we've had some situations where, especially in this market, with this unique market, what as agents are we supposed to be disclosing about properties? And don't forget, as agents, as licensees, we have a duty to discover and disclose. But how far does that discovery go? How far does it go? Are we supposed to get in the crawl space? Are we supposed to go in the attic? How far does that discovery go?
I think it should be what we consider reasonable.
Okay, all right, reasonable. What do you mean by what does that mean, Erica? What does reasonable look like?
I would say like the average person would expect it.
Okay, okay, reasonable means what the average person would expect. Okay, all right,
I
all
would
right,
think that an agent going like underneath the house into a crawl space is not reasonable. I don't think the average person would expect that.
okay. Average person would not expect it. Okay, all right, well, thank you for that. I see, Judy, you came off of mute.
So we recently had some experience with a buyer's agent who was thinking she was being ultra thorough by looking in the by actually going in the crawl space,
Mhm.
and learned that actually you should not be going in the crawl space
Okay,
and passing along any opinions about the structure, about anything. It's okay to stand there and take a look inside, but stay out of the crawl space.
okay,
So
all right.
that's what I've learned, but I'd like to hear your opinion about that.
All right, that's a good one. Thank you, Judy, for that. Staying out of those crawl spaces. All right, all right. Cindy.
I have one. Yeah.
Okay,
So I did look in a crawl space one. Of course, I look in crawl spaces and I go up in the attic just to look around. But in the crawl space, I heard running water and they had a major leak
Hmm.
that was fixed before I listed the house.
Okay,
So,
okay,
I mean,
okay. So Cindy, you're speaking, and I like this. Okay.
and this
you're
is before I
speaking-
listed it. So I go around the house and so this is, do I offer my opinion? No, but when you hear running water, you've got a problem.
Okay,
Or you don't have a vapor barrier. What do you think about getting a vapor barrier? Very minimal. That's, but I still like to get my eyes, like if we've got water in the crawl space, I don't want to list it. I want them to rectify it.
gotcha, gotcha. So I like that, Cindy, and I like that, Judy. So Cindy's speaking from a listing agent perspective, things that you're going to do prior to listing the property, because we want to know as listing agents, okay, if there is a problem with it, could we have discovered that, or could we have had prior knowledge of it? I see that point. And I also see Judy's from the buyer. She's speaking her experience from the buyer's agent standpoint. Okay, I'm walking through that house with my buyer. What am I supposed to discover as I'm walking through? Do I go in the crawl space? Is that appropriate? Do I go in the attic? Do I try to get on the roof? That type of thing. So very good, Cindy. And I do think from a listing agent's perspective, some things like that, Cindy chooses to go in now I'm gonna tell you, I'm not going in anybody's crawl space. I'm not gonna do it. Yeah, call me chicken scared or what have you. I'm just not gonna do it. But I applaud Cindy for that, because she did discover something and the seller rectified it, corrected it before it was even listed. Do we have to go in crawl spaces as a listing agent? No, we don't. Why is that? It's because that is considered other professional advice, and that is in our agency agreements. We are supposed to stay in the realm of real estate, whereas that falls in the category of an inspector. So we're not required or expected to discover things that are not easily seen, if that makes sense. Now, in Judy's case, from a buyer's agent standpoint, going in crawl spaces, it's okay if I do, but I'm not the expert in that area. I can give you my opinion, possibly. Could that opinion kind of cross the lines? Possibly, possibly. And here's the other thing. It depends on when that was done. Did I go in the crawl space at a showing, or did I go in the crawl space along with the inspector at the inspection? So that's another thing. So we have those things to consider as a buyer's agent. Am I checking out things prior or while I'm on the showing? Is that appropriate? What do you all think?
So I'm thinking that it's dangerous to do that
Mhm, mhm.
because we're already taking on so much liability with buyers, advising them to bring so much money to in the purchase price and the due diligence. I know we don't advise them, but even if you just throw out anecdotal evidence about what others are doing, we're standing by where they're throwing gobs of money at a house that frequently they haven't seen in person. And now, as the buyer's agent, you go into that crawl space and maybe you miss something, or you pass the wrong opinion along about it. I think you're taking on tremendous liability. And as I said, I've learned this the hard way because we had a situation where other things got discovered and the buyer's agent had been in there. And why didn't she see it? You know, things like structural termite damage that was buried under the insulation. I think you just open yourself up to more liability if you do things like that you're not really supposed to do, or it's not advisable to do.
Yeah.
As a
Judy,
buyer's agent.
yes, I am 100% of that opinion as well. I like things simple. I am a simple person. I like things simple. I like them easy. And I am of the same opinion especially as buyer's agent, especially if we're on a showing, stay out of that lane. If it's easily seen, if we clearly see water coming out of the ceiling, that's obvious to the eye. I totally get that. However, going in attics as a buyer's agent, we are opening ourselves to liability. Why didn't, like Judy said, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I see the termite damage? Why didn't I? And here's the thing, although the real estate commission would probably side with the agent saying that's not your area of expertise. However, these buyers in this unique market, do we want to go up against that buyer saying, well, you went in there, why didn't you see the termite damage? So it's not so much on the real estate commission side, it's on these buyers today, as Judy said, who are purchasing properties and making offers sight unseen. But if we told them we went in the crawl space, or we went in the attic, or we looked at the windows, but we didn't catch something, and they waived their right to an inspection, which we don't advise, but say if they did, we just opened ourselves up to liability, not so much with the real estate commission, but with that buyer, because we took it upon ourselves to do some things that's not in our real estate lane. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Judy, and I see Tara is agreeing as well. I'm thinking liability as well. Absolutely. So keep it simple, stay in our real estate lane. We do have a duty to discover and disclose, but not so much things that are hidden, but things that are easily seen with a walkthrough. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes, Judy, I'm sorry.
I'll just add what we're doing, because we're currently working with several long distance buyers who are doing two-tiered due diligence fees and sight unseen offers. We are telling them about the opportunity to bring a home inspector for an observational inspection only. We've learned that, you know, you ask them not to blast all over their shirt that they're a home inspector, and they're not allowed to poke and prod or turn on the dishwasher, but that they can do things that we as agents don't do.
Right.
Like, you know, if they want to take a look at the roof, or if they want to go in the crawl space and come along more as a contractor friend than as a bona fide inspector. And there are companies that are doing that now for $100, $200, and, you know, making clear to the buyer that this should not be considered in lieu of the full-blown home inspection that they get later on. But it's more information than they would have without it.
Right. I love that, Judy, making those disclaimers up front and educating that buyer that, hey, This is not a full-blown inspection. It's another set of eyes that are more trained than mine, is basically what that is. I love that. And that is a good strategy in this market. Absolutely a good strategy with those disclaimers and education to the buyer. So I like that. I like that. Anybody else, anything to offer, to comment, questions? All right, very well. So we've talked about antitrust and boycotting, something that we do not want to do. We've talked about material facts. Oh, here's the thing. I just want to bring this up before I leave material facts. Even though a seller should disclose material fact, they can choose no representation, which means I plead the fifth. I'm not saying there is, I'm not saying there is not. I'm just not saying. So they can do that. However, we as agents have a duty to disclose even if the seller does not. So if something is found out and the seller chooses not to disclose, then we have to educate our sellers to let them know, well, guess what we do? Even though you're not, I have to disclose it. So I just wanted to slip that reminder in there. All right, so last topic that I have is contract termination and agency termination. All right, so let's talk about contract termination first. When it comes to contract termination, and we are seeing this a lot in today's market, where could be a situation where a buyer offers sight unseen, and when they get here, they're under contract now. When they get to the property, they don't like something about it and they want to terminate, and it's going to, of course, depend on whether it's before the due diligence period ends or after the due diligence period ends, or even if there was a due diligence period. When it comes to contract termination, who has to make who whole, or is there any making anybody whole in contract terminations? Talk about that. Anybody have any experience with contract terminations where a buyer is asking for money back, or a seller is saying, well, no, I'm not giving your money back? I know you all have had some situations like that. Anybody want to share? Anybody? Not everybody at one time.
Okay, I'll share.
Thank you, Judy.
Very painful situation where a buyer terminated. There was $20,000 due diligence she paid. And then once she inspected, discovered all sorts of things were wrong with the house that hadn't been disclosed and or were misrepresented.
Okay.
And we made a very strong case about every last detail. I shouldn't say we, it was Allison. I give her the credit for it.
Okay.
She got an attorney involved to give her the right language and to give her the right guidance.
Mhm.
Things were represented as new, where when we checked serial numbers, they weren't new. This was one of those cases where there was termite damage that was under new insulation that was clearly like covered up by a contractor who was just hired to make it look pretty and not take care of everything. So there was a lot of work that went into crafting a thoroughly written up document that listed all of these items, and it worked. We got back the full $20,000 due diligence for the buyer.
Wow. Wow. Judy, that's a great story. Thank you so much for, well, I guess it's not a story, it's real. Thank you for sharing that. And I applaud you and Allison for getting an attorney involved, crafting the language to send to this particular seller who returned it. Because a lot of sellers would have said, especially in this market, we're not giving anything back. So it must have been very compelling. Plus, maybe you were working with a great listing agent who saw your side as well, who helped to convince the sellers to give it back. So that one turned out pretty well.
I think the agent was, I mean, everybody was blindsided by it, and I don't recommend it to other agents. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get through this. And the buyer was very adamant and very, of course, she was upset with us because, you know, this was the case where Allison had gone in a crawl space and didn't come out and say it. But, you know, I think the implication was, well, you were in there. How come you didn't see this kind of thing? And how come you didn't notice more? And isn't it your job to be giving me more of this kind of input? And I mean, for a while we thought, well, you know, maybe we should all be getting home inspector certifications. And then someone else kind of straightened me out and said, Judy, we are real estate agents. Our job is to open doors, write and negotiate offers, and that's it. And anything beyond that, if you are looking for that kind of real estate agent, you should be hiring that guy who is a contractor and got his real estate license.
I love it, Judy. Love it, love it, love it. I love that. Our job is to open doors and negotiate. That's our job. That's what we do. I love that. I love that KISS method. Keep it simple. Keep it simple.
I have one.
Yes, Cindy. Yes, ma'am.
So I had one. It's actually going to close. It's closed today.
Okay.
And when it first went under contract, it was a single mom and she didn't pay a lot of money. It was $4,000 due diligence. And she got scared after the home inspection and the agent said, I've never had this happen and this is what's going on. And she just can't do this. And the seller and I talked and he said, I'm not taking her money. So he gave it back to her.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
it was a situation where he wasn't down here and he just understood the whole situation. And then we had to disclose. I mean, I had to give the inspection to whoever wanted it next. We still got over asking and they still did their own inspections and everything, but it worked out. But I always say that, you know, kind of the karma comes back to you. Like, you know, that was a good thing that he did that. I've had another one where it was terminated and they didn't give it back. It was like $5,000. And, you know, and then that seller said, I'm not giving the money back. And it was just because he changed his mind. It was nothing to do with inspections or anything.
Gotcha.
I mean, if there's material facts, like the one that Judy just said, I've had some where it was material facts where the seller terminated and then that's a whole nother ballgame.
That's a whole nother
Right
ballgame.
before, oh yeah, those sellers were handing out checks to everybody except for the commission check, but everybody was getting.
Exactly.
I can tell you some stories, but we won't go there.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, those are two good examples of a seller just saying, you know what, I'm not going to keep my money, you know, for the various reasons. Let me give it back. And then there's another situation where a buyer just says, I changed my mind. I don't want to buy it. And so in that particular case, the seller kept the due diligence fee, didn't give it back. So here's my question. When is the seller supposed to give due diligence money back? Are they ever supposed to give it back?
If they breach.
There you go. If they breach.
If the seller breaches.
If that seller breaches, that's when, and not only the due diligence, they need to make that buyer whole if they breach. Whole means inspection costs, their investigation.
The attorney, the title company, everything.
All of that, exactly. So not only are they supposed to return the due diligence and earnest money, if any, but the monies to make that buyer whole, whatever that buyer put into it, that's what the seller is supposed to return to them if the seller breaches. So those are 2 or 3 very good examples of contract termination. You know, in this unique market, I'm seeing a lot of stuff, and I know you all are because I'm hearing about your stories and the situations that you all are getting into. So if the contract terminates, Sometimes agency terminates as well. Let me ask you all, are any of you asking for payment for the work you put in if agency is terminated? Anybody had any situations like that? No? No one on the call? Well, go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
I had one years ago
Okay.
where I was the listing agent and I'd procured a buyer.
Mhm.
And then something changed and then there was termination. And what I learned is that in our listing paperwork, there's language about having earned 50%. I think that was in the day when we were seeing earnest money, right? The earnest money gets split between the seller and the listing company.
Mhm.
But nowadays, I was going to ask you, what about now? I mean, almost no one is including any earnest money. So what happens if there is a termination?
Yeah, that's a good one, Judy, and you're absolutely right. In today's market, no one's giving any earnest money or anything like that. So I have a couple of questions with that. Does it matter, for instance, suppose there's a contract, you have the listing, you all have the listing, get an offer, exceptional offer, per the terms that a seller would accept, obviously, because you're under contract. Buyer decides they don't want the property for whatever reason. After that contract terminates, seller then says, well, you know what? I fixed up my house at this point. I made some repairs. I like my house. I'm going to stay here. Let me terminate agency. What happens in that case? Have we earned a commission? Have we earned a commission?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Barney. I was waiting for somebody to say yes. We have earned a commission. Why do you say we've earned a commission, Barney?
Well, if you had to go out and find a buyer for that property and you have completed that obligation.
All righty. Thank you, sir. And that is in our listing agreements. It's deemed earned when we bought a ready, willing, and able buyer for the property at terms agreeable to the seller. We can prove it was agreeable because they signed the offer and it became a contract. We have then earned a commission. Do we as listing firms always go after that earned commission? No, we don't. We do not. Brady, thank you, Tara. I see your response in the chat. That's right. Ready, willing, and able buyer. We've done it. We've earned it. We don't always go after it. Could we? Could we? Absolutely. And maybe sometimes we should, although we don't do it, maybe we should, to keep these sellers from doing just that, from listing, changing their minds and saying, oh, I'm done, as if we've not put any time and sweat into getting that property sold. So that brings me to the next point of this agency termination. What fees can we charge? Can we charge buyers retainer fees?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, yes, and yes. Yes, we can. Now, that may be something we have to change our strategy on depending on the market, right? Especially in this unique market where it's a seller's market and buyers agents are spending so much time with the buyer, right? I hear some agents are writing 20 offers, 7 offers, 10 offers. We're doing all of this work and then buyer gets, burnout and say, I'm not doing this, but you've spent a year working with this buyer. Has anybody thought about charging retainer fees in this market?
I was actually on a CE call last month, and a lot of agents in the Triangle area were talking about it. And so I actually was thinking about it.
Mhm.
So didn't know like the price ranges, and they basically said each agent is doing it different based on the prices of their buyers, or what they're qualified for. They didn't want to charge too much. Like if say for instance the properties they were looking at were in the 300, they didn't go over 500
Okay,
as far as what their retainer fees.
okay.
So
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So in the Triangle, we're seeing that a lot more, and I guess than we're seeing it locally. But yeah, in this market, I'm hearing some agents talking about, I may have to charge a retainer fee because it's a lot of time, especially on weekends when those buyers are, you agree, I see you, Tara. When these buyers agents are spending a lot of time with these buyers, and it's been a year, it's been 6 months, we haven't found anything, or maybe we found something, but the buyer's not winning the bids. So that may be something you want to consider adding to your strategy and to your presentation. Now, let me ask this question. Okay, Tara's saying that happened to me. And yes, I have thought about it. Yes.
I was just saying, I'm actually thinking about redoing my strategy, especially in this market, of how much time and energy I did put. That situation you just mentioned verbatim happened. My buyer was mentally exhausted, and they just couldn't do it anymore, and we had to cancel the contract.
Yeah.
So I did, but that was a lot of time. I mean, months and months of time.
Exactly.
So
And
it's definitely a lesson learned.
it is. It is. And one thing that they don't realize, and it's okay that they don't realize, we're not employees. We don't get paid for spending all of this time on weekends and evenings or any time of the day. We don't get paid for that. We don't get paid until that thing closes. So, and then guess what? Sometimes it doesn't close then. We've had situations where you got to terminate the contract. So it's becoming a thing. So each one of you and all of us can run our business how we choose, but that is something to consider, especially in this market. Now I have a question. Now, suppose you didn't charge a retainer fee up front. And we know with the retainer fee per the agency agreement, especially buyer's agents, you can choose whether or not it's gonna be credited towards their closing or not. But here's my question. Suppose I didn't charge a retainer fee up front, but they asked to terminate the agency. Now I'm bothered because I have spent all of this time with them. Can I go back and ask for a fee?
You can, but they can say no.
You're right, Erica. Yes, we can. We can ask. They can say no, but we can ask. I see you came off mute. Thank you for that, Erica. I see you came off mute, Judy.
Well, I think I hadn't thought about it on the buyer side. I think if we all asked for it on the buyer side, it'd be great. I think if you ask for a retainer fee, but most people aren't, they're going to say, well, why should I work with you? I'll go find an agent who won't charge it. But I do, in my listing agreement, I have $1,000 early termination fee built in there. And I think maybe now's the time to add it to the buyer agency paperwork. And if I have it in there, and if I address it in my buyer consult, well, then if you terminate on me, then, okay, well, I've already explained to you that you owe me this fee. I don't think you've got a leg to stand on if you don't have it written in your agreement up front.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Judy. And that goes to Erica's point. We can ask after the fact, but of course, I would say no, probably as a buyer. I'd probably say no, I'm not giving you anything, because why, Judy? I didn't agree to it up front. It wasn't in the agency agreement. Judy, I love that. She's charging or not charging, making that known up front to her sellers. If you terminate early, this is what it's going to cost you, because you've spent money to market that property. It costs you photos, professional photos, measurements, all of those things, virtual tours. It's costing you. And if they terminate early, and I don't do my, if they terminate early before I am, before you give me the allotted time to complete the job, then yes, I'm going to charge, in your case, $1,000. I absolutely love that. And maybe that is one way to do it with buyers as well, putting it in the agreement up front.
I think
love
it's trickier. I think it's trickier to do on the buyer side though. On the
Mhm.
seller side, you can quantify, you know, I'm paying for the appraiser, I'm paying for the photographs, I'm paying for, you know, all stager. So
Right.
you quantify the items you've spent money on.
Mhm.
And when I've been asked about it and I explain that, they say, well, of course. On the buyer side though, what have you spent other than your time? And how do you know how much time you're going to be spending with them before they get burnout or whatever? So I don't quite have a handle on how you'd go about it as gracefully on the buyer side as on the listing side.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Very good point. So I see, Paul, you came off from mute. I understand that completely. So maybe it does need to remain or consider remaining a retainer fee up front for the time, for the gas, for, you know, the time that I've taken to write offers or something like that. But yeah, that's a very good point, Judy. Very good point. Paul, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Judy, when you charge a retainer on the seller side, do you do that? Do you explain that to them during the listing presentation? Or do you wait till after they agree to give you the listing and go over that once you sign the contract?
It's on the, I don't make a point of it during my listing conversation. I have it on my paperwork in that additional provisions paragraph. I have the early termination fee, $1,000 early termination fee. I spell out, I say staging advice is included in the listing agreement, and not furniture rental fees. And lately I'm throwing in a couple of other things that I am including. So no, I'm not making a big point of it during my conversation, but when I'm getting listing paperwork signed, I'll either, if I'm doing it in person, I'll either draw attention to it or they'll ask me about it. And it does come up, but I don't make it a point to talk about it.
Okay.
I mean, to me, it's pretty self-explanatory. Early termination fee. You know, I say, well, I give myself 6 months to get your home sold. It's not going to take me 6 months. But if you pull it out from under me in less time than I have the opportunity to sell your home, then yeah, I'm seeking compensation for or reimbursement for the things that I've already spent on.
Yeah.
And I learned that the hard way when I did a couple of listings that did get terminated and I had spent money.
Yeah. That's good, Judy. Paul, that was a very good, Judy gave a very good response to that. I absolutely love that. And here's the other part I love about Judy. She doesn't focus on it so much because she's confident. She's confident that I know I can get this property sold in this amount of time. However, if you don't give me the allotted time necessary, then I need to be reimbursed for the monies I put into it, and her confidence in that. So Judy has become very confident in conveying that to her sellers, obviously. I like
But I
it.
have to become more confident on the buyer side. I haven't quite figured out how to make that work yet because I think buyers are all in such pain right now.
Yeah.
Well, Judy, I want to share that I was instructed as far as with the buyer side that some listing agents in some areas, they're putting down for the buyers for the commission to be 0. So that's how they presented it to their buyers. So yeah, that's how they're presenting it to their buyers. So if you say, hey, I want to get paid to represent you well. So, if we don't know what we're going to be looking at. So if I'm showing you a home and I am putting in these offers and I'm fighting for you, and I want to make sure that, I am being compensated for this, because you may not be compensated, and making sure that you educate them that, typically you are compensated on the listing side. So that's how it was presented to me in order to talk to the buyers.
Well, that's a
Okay.
whole other conversation, because now you're talking about a minimum compensation fee as part of your buyer agency. And we had this discussion the other morning on this
Mhm.
that that with discount brokers paying out 2%, 1.5%, if you're not putting something in your agency agreement to put a floor on what you're seeking, then you're open to these listing firms that are not paying anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Is that Shania?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't want to put zero anywhere on anything.
I know. I don't either.
Except if you're not charging a retainer fee on the buyer side, that's the only zero you'll see on an agency agreement. But yeah, that's interesting. And here's the thing, it's agents' business, and agents can conduct and run their business how they choose. Here's our biggest thing. We want you all to get paid your worth. We all want to be paid our worth. So, and we do not want to ignorantly leave money on the table or work for free if we don't have to. So that's why the discussion. All right. Very good. Anybody have anything to share or add? I see we have just a couple minutes left. Anything to share, summarize before we wrap up?
So just one quick question. So on the issue of terminating a contract when there is no when there is no earnest money, there's no money there to split, or, I mean, so that's it, right? There's just nothing. It really doesn't matter now if you have no due diligence period, right? As we're writing offers now, where the due diligence end date is the effective date of the contract. So you terminate, if I terminate on day 2 or day 22, there's no greater penalty, right? I mean, there's nothing.
There's nothing. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And it's just interesting that this is the market that we're in. We're in such a unique market. I remember when due diligence, when we became a due diligence state and due diligence had just started, nobody was given due diligence at that point. Due diligence was zero, and earnest money was this whatever amount, thousands or whatever, but there was no due diligence. A lot of agents didn't like due diligence. We didn't understand due diligence, but now we see the benefit of due diligence in this particular unique market when it is a seller's market. I saw Mary, I think, came off of mute.
Yes, I just wanted to say on the due diligence piece, I haven't had it happen lately, but in the past, as the buyer's agent and as a seller's agent, when the offer had been accepted and signed, but the due diligence had not been delivered. This always gets me, because I've had so many different views, but I had it happen to me as a listing agent. And, the next morning we hadn't gotten it. We accepted that night and everyone signed, and then it had not been delivered. And so it was the same kind of thing where they said, well, it hasn't been delivered, so we're not bringing it. And then I've had as a buyer's agent, had to do the same thing. And, but it's supposedly under contract and it's owed. But when I've gone to, not to use Teresa, but to previous BICs, and you know, if the buyer is saying no, I'm not giving it, then we don't. But then on the other hand, you hear at classes and different things that it's still owed and you're breaking the contract that way. So I'm still unclear. I haven't had to deal with it luckily lately, but I'm still unclear as to the concrete nature of that, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If it's under contract, if there has been offer, acceptance, and communication, that
Mhm.
constitutes a contract. And guess what? That due diligence fee, if any, is owed at that
Right.
time. It's owed. Now,
Mhm.
here's the other thing. You bring it in that caveat, if that buyer decides and chooses not to give it, they are in breach.
Right.
And as a seller, they have the right to make the demand. So we would make the demand for it and give them one banking day to get it in. If they do not do it at that point, they're definitely in breach. They were before, but now the seller's done their part. And so guess what that seller could do? They could sue.
Right.
But the thing in this market,
Mhm.
you want to go through it's going to be up to the seller whether they want to go through the actions of suing.
Right. Because they
what
could get another buyer the next hour.
Right, exactly, just like that, or even had a backup on it, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's due, it's owed
Right.
at that point. Once there's a contract, it's owed. But these buyers they're getting brave too and saying, okay, I changed my mind, or I see another property, or
Mhm.
so I'm not giving it. And let me just say this, because I'm hearing this a lot. Due diligence does not, if the due diligence is given, does not mean there's no contract. Definition of a contract is offer, acceptance, communication. As long as those three things have happened, there's a contract. It is not predicated upon due diligence fee being received. So I just wanted to say that and make that clear. So if the buyer has not turned it in, they are in breach of the contract. Very good. All right.
Oh, I had one thing real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
So talking about the buyer agency agreement, of course, I don't work with buyers, but in script practice, we actually use that. We actually go over that type of thing. And Joe Don is amazing at that. And he does have his buyers, they sign a 3% buyer agency agreement.
Love it.
Okay, so if anybody wants to work on that, script practices, we're always open. We have maybe 3 or 4 of us at 8:30. It's in my habit every morning, except for I missed one day this week. So I do pivot shift, and then we do the script practice, and then it's lead gen. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay. I love that, Cindy. Thank you for putting that.
You're welcome. No, thank you. I'm so glad I could be on today. I love this format, and I love that there's some unusual things happening. So it's always good to hear, especially about that agent, that first thing you said about the boycotting and saying you couldn't show a property. Oh, has anybody, okay, I'll tell you one story.
Okay.
Ring doorbells.
Okay.
Ring doorbells do capture video and what people are doing. And there was an agent, a local agent, that was doing something, and you just have to be careful. We should be held to a higher standard, and we have to be very careful of what we do and what we say and how we act. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, that's a great reminder, because we could be being videoed.
We're held to a high standard. So be careful what you say, how you say it in front of anyone, in front of your customer, but the seller. For instance, it's just the Ring doorbell, but you don't even realize what you're saying. Oh, this is, there's certain things and how people are perceived goes a long way. How about if they realize who you are and then say, well, we don't want to work with that agent. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing things out right now. Like,
that's right.
There's some weird stuff going on. It's like weirder because of the market.
It's so weird right now. Very unique. Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you for that reminder, Cindy. Let's behave ourselves. while we're in the marketplace working and doing business, because this is what funds our life, right? So thank you all today. Tiffany sends her hellos and she wished she could have been here. She was at a funeral. So you'll see her on the next Glad You Asked. Thank you everybody for attending. I am so glad you all asked. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.